Hello, everyone. How are you? I usually don't do spaces midday, but I just felt like it. Um, I want to talk a little bit about the Alex Jones issue because I think it's interesting, and I also think there'll be a variety of opinions on that. Excuse me, I'm a little bit under the weather, as you can tell, a little bit of a sore throat, so my voice will just be a little bit lower. Um, but you know, the main impulse for the little blog that I wrote last night at a furious pace was basically about why conservatives love Alex Jones so much. It wasn't so much about why Alex Jones should be banned from Twitter, although I do think the case of Alex Jones brings up a very interesting question in terms of the free speech issue. That is, do you really want to tolerate someone who is absolutely polluting the discourse? And what I mean by that is that he's not only wrong. Obviously, many people are wrong. Most academic articles in the sciences are actually kind of wrong, more or less. But he's acting in a kind of bad faith. I think Alex Jones might very well believe what he's saying. I think he does, actually. But he is just a completely deluded personality. And because he has this charisma, he is able to gain a tremendous following. And he's able to grift off this following in just an incredible way. And so he really has monetized his own delusion. And I do think that that kind of figure is deeply toxic. You have to have some basis in reality to speak and to actually contribute to discourse. There really is no value in listening to a schizophrenic tell you about how, space aliens are telling her that her, aunt wants to kill her and it's a really big problem and that's why she's locked herself in her room for 48 hours. There's really no value in that. And I don't know. Saying I'm pro free speech or something. That's what everyone says. And when everyone says something, that means that it is ultimately a meaningless platitude. There actually is such a thing as bad speech. And there is such a thing that is just so toxic and stupid, but which seems to be able to kind of call upon, you know, base emotions or maybe even incipient schizophrenia among the audience, that I think it actually is extremely bad. And at the very least, we should talk about it seriously and not just kind of grandstand about our love for free speech. But anyway, the what motivated me to write this little blog, let me post it here. How do you post things? Someone else can post. I actually don't know how you post tweets in the space. Someone else can do that. I would appreciate it. But um, my main issue really isn't so much of, is Alex Jones acting in bad faith? Is Alex Jones polluting the public square? But why conservatives love Alex Jones? And so I what sparked me is Ann Coulter, and Ann Coulter really just annoys me in many ways. I've known about Ann Coulter for some time, and I, in a way, I kind of see her as a barometer, a kind of reverse compass, if you will, that wherever she's pointing, you should be sure that that time has passed or she's just downright wrong. She has been I have she has been wrong for 30 years. And there's this kind of Trump era moment where in 2016 where I felt, oh, well, we're all on the same team or something, but I should have stuck with my instincts about her. But again, why do they like Alex Jones? Why is it that when Elon Musk is talking about a very serious issue, which is to put Trump back on the platform, it's a very serious issue because he is running for president. He is a former president, a certainly a public figure, certainly someone that everyone would like to kind of keep their eyes on to know what he's doing. It's an interesting question. He was banned during January 6th, and I think Twitter, understandably thought this guy is just generating chaos. I don't like the idea of permanent bans to begin with, but it does seem a bit like a death sentence for a crime that might very well be a misdemeanor. Even if you rob a liquor store, you will get out of jail in a year or two. You can come back into the world. I think that is fair, and so I think the Donald Trump issue is a really serious issue, and you can have mixed feelings. But she chimed in, Ann Coulter, oh, we need to let in Alex Jones first. This is so important. And, of course, a lot of people gave that a like or, yeah, whoa. Well, why is she saying something this stupid? Is it that she's a free speech absolutist? I think being a free speech absolutist is at least a defensible position. It means you're a libertarian. You would say anything goes. Even I maybe they would draw the line at death threats. Maybe they would draw the line at extreme or illegal pornography. Maybe they draw the line somewhere else. But at the very least, I can respect a libertarian who sticks to his guns and says absolutely he should be on there. And an ISIS soldier, granted, he can't do anything maybe illegal, but yeah, ISIS should be on there too. I mean, it's a defensible position, even though it's certainly not one that I think is realistic or that I agree with. But no, there's some special pleading about Alex Jones from these people like Ann Coulter. So there's something special about Alex Jones. And I think what it is ultimately is that he represents a kind of self image of themselves, a kind of idealized image that they have of themselves. And the thing that I've noticed, and I've actually noticed this about a few other people, is that conservatives will defend you, first off, when you're aiming in their direction. You've got to be aiming in their direction. But they'll defend you when you're innocent, you know, quote unquote, innocent. So one of the excuses made for Alex Jones is basically he knows not what he does. He's just this innocent, goofy, good-natured guy who's worried about losing his country, and he's attacking Democrats. And well, granted, he claims that they're literally vampires, but well, we all get it wrong sometimes, but he's headed in the right direction, and he kind of, again, he's innocent in the sense of being naive. He knows not what he's doing. I think on another level, Alex Jones represents a really serious problem with conservatism in the sense that everything is an emergency for them. So every election is the most important election of your lifetime. And what it is, it's about saying no to something. They are naysayers. It's about loudly yelling no at the latest novelty. It's wearing mask or drag queen story hour or CRT or whatever. And they and I also have certain opinions on all of those things. But they're a type of person who's kind of overwhelmed by the world. They're overwhelmed by progressives who are kind of endlessly pushing forward. And so they're playing whack-a-mole, or it's just this endless rear guard action that we've got to yell no at something new this time. And when you're in that situation of being overwhelmed, there's there's no time and there's no ability to actually put forth a vision of the world. And as I wrote, in that sense, the conservative intellectual really becomes an oxymoron. You can't think about these things too deeply or too clearly or with too much nuance, because after all, it's an emergency. They're out to get your kids. I don't want to hear about your analysis of a situation. I don't want to hear about your nuance. I don't want to hear about your self criticism. They're out to get your kids. So they are kind of schizophrenic on some level. And I think that's maybe another reason why Alex Jones appeals to them. But I do think that is that kind of, what did Buckley write in the initial pages of National Review to stand athwart history yelling stop? That might very well be the best maxim of the conservative. That is what he is constantly doing. And Alex Jones is doing that for them. And he's kind of representing their inner id in the sense that he's not doing it with any pretense of respectability. He's just ripping his shirt off and loudly yelling at people. And so he kind of represents the inner ed. He is who, Ann Coulter or conservatives would be if they had his energy and charisma and they had abandoned all pretense of respectability. So anyway, there it is. There's my argument. If you guys want to hop in, you are welcome. We already have one request here. Reginald Moritz Rosen. All right, you have the floor.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well myself. So personally, I fully agree with you. I think Alex Jones truly has no place anymore in the conservative movement. Frankly, I think there was a case to be made, perhaps when he was a younger man and he was doing things like predicting 9/11 and whatnot. Well, maybe uh,
Predicting 9/11. Give me. Give me a
I won't
break.
say he predicted it. I will say there's a video of him, saying things which eventually came to pass. However,
Yeah,
you're
but
right.
see, that's ultimately bullshit because, like, if you're one of these guys who endlessly predicts that the stock market is going to crash, or endlessly predicts that the New York Yankees are going to lose a baseball game, you're going to be right at some point. And you can kind of come back with that and say, "Ooh, Alex Jones was right,"
I've
or
only
whatever.
seen
And I just find that just nonsense.
I've only seen one clip of him predict. Perhaps he was saying it for years, and if that's the case, then I would agree with you. But
Yeah.
nowadays, he talks about how he's going to eat his neighbor's ass, and all these other crazy stuff. I think there's a term in French called dédiabolisation or something to that effect, and it was used to describe the what was then the Front National, what now is the National Rally, where this party that was initially composed of neo Nazis, skinheads, Holocaust deniers, all these types of characters came to prominence, and then the party kind of cleaned itself up. Now, I think the Republican Party has a much stronger history. We're not tied to these kind of lunatics that the Front National was, but at the same time, I think there are elements of our party which, perhaps they were helpful in previous years, but at this point in time, it's ridiculous to keep them. These clowns such as um, uh, Alex Jones. I guess you could call it can include Ann Coulter. I would say Nick Fuentes as well. Um,
Yeah,
Donald
okay,
Trump.
I
I would put
understand your
Trump.
argument.
What?
I understand your argument, and let me respond, and then I will move on to someone else. First off, the National Front, at least in my estimation, never played upon just outright schizophrenia. So I'm not really making the case of, you're a little rough around the edges, or there's something almost, fun about Alex Jones when he's just kind of talking about wild conspiracy theories of the moon landing. He's a little slice of Americana, I guess you could say, to be perhaps overly fair. Um, but you know, he does represent still the conservative id brain, and I don't know, 30 to 50% of conservatives, particularly those who are motivated to vote, are highly in line with Alex Jones. And I don't know if conservatism can really go anywhere without that element to it. Okay, so Ian S. Octu.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for
Hey,
the
AJ.
words of
Sure.
wisdom. I think whenever I hear you speak, it's like my IQ is increasing on the spot, actually. Um,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. I kind of wanted to ask, maybe I'm looking too much into this, but do you think people like Alex Jones, because I largely agree with your analysis, do you think that there's a possibility that they are some sort of controlled opposition?
There's certainly that possibility. And and also, whatever something however something began, it can end up someplace else. And so I think you could definitely make the case that Alex Jones, when he began, he was this entertaining, wild Texas radio guy. And yeah, there was nothing really suspicious about it, but I guess you kind of could go there at some point. And whenever you have a cash cow like InfoWars became, that, I mean, what was revealed in these, depositions and trials? I mean, this thing is pumping out hundreds of thousands of dollars a day or something. I mean, it's just incredible. Once you have something that lucrative, then the rats come on the ship. So to reverse the metaphor, like the people are going to want to get a piece of that pie. um yeah, I mean, I there's an interesting video of Alex Jones where I think he's talking about David Icke, or David Icke. And David Icke is very famous. I think he used to be an athlete, and then he was a sports announcer, like a soccer or football, I guess, over in the UK announcer. And then he just kind of went off the deep end. And Alex Jones was saying that, oh, he's a turd in the punch bowl. So basically, we're talking about the New World Order, and then this guy talks about, they're actually shape shifting lizards, and so you can just immediately dismiss it. And he's like, he was basically suggesting that he was a kind of false opposition in that case. I think it, and then obviously that same criticism could be applied to Alex Jones. So I think it's possible. I mean, without evidence, I wouldn't want to make that suggestion. But I think I would, at least the way I would talk about it is in a slightly different way of false opposition. And it's not so much that you want to demonize or slander the other side. Like, let's get the most ridiculous person possible so that the other side looks bad and we win. I think the notion of the caducean which is something that Mark Brauman has talked about. I've talked about it as well. It's not so much about like controlling the other side of discourse and making them look like complete ridiculous fools who should just be dismissed out of hand. It's about kind of creating a synthetic opposition. And so if you're right wing, you like Alex Jones, that means you want to slam the Constitution and talk about the Bible, and you're a libertarian, and all that kind of stuff. That's what it means to be right wing. And so I think it's that creation of a synthetic opposition. So it's like the difference of, are you a capitalist or are you a communist? Are you a Jew or are you a Christian? All of those binaries, like that's not the full story. That's by no means even close to representing the spectrum of opinion. And yet you create these binaries where people are like, oh yeah, I'm on Alex Jones's side. And I think Anthony Fauci is trying to kill everyone, and whatever, just all these kind of lunatic opinions, but also opinions that are just kind of useless and stupid, and can't really go anywhere. So I think in some ways he's part of that caducean, but I would say the entire American right is part of that kind of caducean opposition, where it's about synthetically creating a binary. But that, again, that binary is something that is going to exclude, serious analysis and real alternatives.
So I guess my question, yeah, it's interesting. So I'm curious, would you throw someone like Nick Fuentes, he got mentioned earlier, would you throw him in this category too, or do you think he's a little bit more nuanced than that?
Well, I mean, yeah, I've actually been quite fair to Nick Fuentes recently. I do think that there's a kind of man behind the mask with Nick Fuentes, and but certainly back in 2020, he was operating exactly like Alex Jones. In fact, they were together doing the Stop the Steal stuff. And the way that he was operating was a kind of, vanguard of the conservative movement. So the conservative movement couldn't fully endorse them because, Alex Jones thinks the moon landing was a hoax and Nick Fuentes is a racialist of some kind or whatever, has denied the Holocaust. But they were acting as the kind of stormtroopers, the people who go in first and the people who get killed. And so they were completely in line with the conservative movement. And it doesn't really matter if their opinions are kind of wackier. They are pointing in the right direction. Like if a conservative wants you to vote for a tax cut, does it really matter that much if your motivation for voting for that tax cut is, I want to defund the alien overlords who have been in control of this country since 1960 or something. It doesn't matter if you believe it. You're still voting for the tax cut. You're still doing it. And so I think Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes were kind of like frontline troopers. And again, I don't think Nick Fuentes has been able to monetize to the degree that Alex Jones has. And I do think his audience is smaller. Remember, I read this somewhere, and I could go check on it. But I if you guys could just take my word for it, when Alex Jones in the 2000s, Alex Jones supposedly had a larger audience than Rush Limbaugh on the Genesis network. So he has been a tremendous force for some time. Yet, of course, he wasn't really talked about. But he was talked about, and he became an essential public figure when he was basically just kind of like a conservative in a hurry. He was the vanguard stormtrooper wing of the Trump movement. And, those people, when you go in first, you're most likely to get killed. Okay. Lily, go for it.
Hi, so I think when you mentioned the William F. Buckley quote, I think there are forms of like positivistic conservatism historically, like Salazar in Portugal. So I wanted to know what you think of like the phenomenon of like republicanism as like a government structure being incompatible with these forms of positive conservatism.
Oh, so republicanism in the sense of a civil representative government
Yeah,
being
because
incompatible with kind of rad trad or some kind of traditionalist
well,
authoritarian
any sort of
force.
like traditional government, right? Like the issue here seems to be that conservatives in America are sort of forced into this dichotomy by virtue of the structure of government, right?
Yeah, I get you. No, I don't think they're incompatible. I don't. What are you saying? Like you must have a kind of dictatorship in order to achieve this? I don't think that's true.
Well, I think it's just structural, right? Like, what are the conservative structures or policies that could be advocated for within a like civil representative democracy? It seems like any sort of positive conservative belief, say in like corporatism or any sort of like natural social structures, would need some sort of entire governmental structure to sustain them and operate under like how that policy is integrated, right?
Well, corporatism has been pursued absent a dictatorship. It seems like the what you're suggesting is that you need this dictatorship. That's at least my impression because I mean, corporatism has been pursued before the Second World War and afterward in republican forms of government. Unquestionably. I don't think you necessarily need, Mussolini in total command having been given his, perch by the king himself. I don't think you necessarily need that to pursue corporatism because there are, you know, I would say most, I mean, this is one of the ironies of the Second World War is that fascism was defeated, yet many of its economic ideas were triumphant. So, I mean, there was a large degree of corporatism in West Germany after the war, of basically capital, labor, and the government kind of colluding, basically, in order to do what is best in their perception. I mean, that has happened. I mean, I think it's an interesting question of, you know, is traditionalism possible in a highly capitalist society? I think that's an interesting question. I think I would probably have a little bit of a nuanced answer to that. But go, yes, if you want to say something else, Lily, you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's also like the structure of the US government specifically. Like there's a sense of constitutionalism and the values of the Constitution take precedent over any sort of positivistic notion of any ideology really that
Yeah,
is
I
sort of
agree with you.
incompatible with it.
There's a kind of fetish of the text itself. And there's there's some statements about this, like the health of the people is the ultimate law or the highest law, which is a Roman concept. And I think you could even see something like this coming up where people would say things like the Constitution isn't a suicide pact. And both of those maxims can mean different things, but I mean, I think what they ultimately mean is that we're not going to create a law that's kind of, perfectly liberal and constitutional, and it leads to the entire public being poisoned or something. I mean, that is just absurd. At some point, you might need to just throw out the law or ignore it if your ultimate goal is the health of the people. That is the highest law. I think that is a completely sound way of thinking. I mean, there was a lot of discussion around 9/11 of, are these freedoms and rights of privacy, are terrorists going to take advantage of those? And I think a lot of liberals would kind of hand wave these things away, but I actually think they were and are serious concerns. A government is going to need to keep secrets. A government is going to need to investigate things and so on. That's just the nature of the beast. And you can't make just a purely liberal argument when it is leading to death and destruction. So yeah, I do think America, probably more than any government ever, fetishizes its constitution, its holy text. I mean, the ultimate sovereign body in the United States is the Supreme Court. So you basically have lawyers dressed up like priests in black robes, offering their, exegesis of the Constitution. It is really absurd, and it really is a kind of religious, like, arrangement. And it's, I think we should also, like, we live in a secular society, but there still are these religious elements that undergird it. And I think a lot of people, particularly after Roe v. Wade and other things like that, a lot of people are getting more cynical about the Supreme Court. They're just a bunch of conservative activists. They're not. This isn't really constitutional. They're just kind of going by their whim or something. That might even be good in a way, but that people are cynical. But the fact is, I don't think any organization has ever fetishized the Constitution, a holy text, in the way that America fetishizes the Constitution. To bring it back to Alex Jones is 100% on board with that textual fetishism. That is what it means to be the right wing. It's being a constitutionalist, just being beholden to this text, which might, to be fair, might very well be pretty good, but was written at a certain point of time, written by flawed people. It's not something that I think we should hold up as holy writ. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like this constitutional fetishism prevents any sort of like philosophical basis for beliefs, right? Like the justification for the Constitution is the Constitution itself. It's a very circular form of conservatism.
It definitely is. It is inherently circular at the end of the day. Yes. And again, they will talk about like public interest and things like that in making decisions. But yeah, I mean, shouldn't ultimately the public interest be the highest goal? And shouldn't we, change the Constitution or ignore it altogether when that is, occurring, when there's an emergency? I mean, if we're being invaded, do we really want to talk about constitutional rights? I mean, it's there are emergencies sometimes. I was just criticizing conservatives for thinking that every day is an emergency. we need to endlessly say no to things. And I would stand by that criticism. But that doesn't mean that emergencies don't exist sometimes. And if your Constitution is holding you back, you need to discard it. All right. Thank you for the thoughtful questions, Lily. Okay, Daisy. You are up. Oh, I need to accept your request. Yes.
Yeah, I kind of just popped in here randomly pretty recently, and I heard Lily mention about the whole, oh yeah, the Constitution, yada yada. I agree. I think that the entire point of the Constitution is, again, for a moral and upright society. I don't think that the Constitution really applies at this point in time. And more so, I'd like to say one thing about conservatism. I'm having a hard time personally even calling myself a conservative, because at this point, what are we really conserving? kind of
Yeah.
just like I don't know, random. Thanks for
Well, I would let
acknowledging
me.
me.
Oh yeah, thank you for the comments. Yeah, I would add this. I get what you're saying when you say the Constitution was written for a different people and so on. I actually probably wouldn't. I don't think the big difference really is that we're kind of less moral or something. Um, I think the big difference is that there, when you say something like the health of the people is the highest law, what does that mean? Like, what is the compelling interest of the American public? Are we in fact a people that is coherent and has an interest? Or is the United States a kind of platform for economic activity? And I think that's really the distinction because, there are a lot of moral, upright Americans. I mean, I think sometimes the like moral depravity of the American public is maybe kind of overstated on some level. I think I think what's maybe most striking about the American public is how conformist and just ultimately boring they are, as opposed to being morally depraved heathens. But regardless, I think the major issue is that there really isn't like a coherent notion of a people. When you listen to Supreme Court arguments, I listened to about 2 or 3 hours of oral arguments in the Supreme Court about affirmative action, and it was interesting, and the justices were pretty smart, but there was just so much kind of like hand waving around issues like compelling interest or like a kind of lack of seriousness about understanding what that is. And it seems like, I guess, the compelling interest, as I understood it, of the American public is basically we're an economic platform for self-actualization. That's the compelling interest. And we don't want to be too mean to any individual person. I mean, sometimes when there is a compelling interest of the nation, you have to be mean to people. You have to be unfair. And I don't think they could even tolerate that thought. You want to ask one more question, Daisy?
Yeah, I just to add to that, I do want to say I agree. Hold on, let me collect this for a second.
Sure.
The idea that free speech for everybody, the idea that all these things that we have been afforded as a nation are to this day still applicable all the time. I agree completely. There are people in this country who have come here who don't have the nation at its core. In like, that's not who they're working for, that's not what they're trying to uplift. They do see it as a springboard for their own interests to, again, fundamentally change our culture, or you know export it out somewhere else to their family elsewhere. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, I just long form agreeing with you.
Yes. Yeah. I think we do. We are. I think what you're kind of saying is what I said. Well, we're almost like we imagine America as an economic platform. And what is it? What are we really about? I think it's difficult for people to answer that question. And just saying we're about freedom or something, that's just where you're about freedom. I mean, freedom for what? What are you going to do with this freedom? Who are you? I think these are questions that are never really contemplated. All right. Thank you, Daisy, for your thoughtful comments. All right. Yeah. Hey, Reginald, you keep requesting. Look, guy, you're a little too like conservative movement advocate for me, for my taste. Just personally, I let you speak. I'm going to kind of move on. Okay, Mia, you are up.
Hi, Richard.
Hey.
When you guys were talking about the economic springboard, my question is, what would your argument be? The argument that it's not an economic springboard, because I kind of feel like,
Well, I said economic platform. I didn't say
or I'm
springboard.
sorry,
but
economic platform. Yeah, because to me, I'm like, well, it does kind of make sense that America has always been like a beacon of light for people to come to basically enrich themselves. Like, I don't know, probably
Right.
most of our ancestors had that in mind. When they came here, they're like, well, we can create a better life for ourselves. And that's maybe why America doesn't have like a straight up culture, like some other European countries do. But anyway, my thoughts, or my question to you was just kind of like, what would be the argument that we are not just an economic platform, or that we aren't at all?
Well, I think it's the question is kind of what should we be? Because we even if we were that in the past, and I don't think it was so much a society of immigrants who wanted to make a buck or something. I actually think that's a misrepresentation, although there was surely a lot of that. But regardless of the history, regardless why your grandpappy came here, what do we want to be? We're a global empire of preeminent importance, and the globe just wouldn't function, at least the way that it does now, without us. And we have tremendous power. We have tremendous, there is an industry and so on. So what do we want to do with that? And I don't know. I mean, I don't quite want to answer. I mean, I do feel like America is kind of so far down this path that I don't know if this question will be answered, but at least the question has to be asked. And I don't think the right ever wants to ask that. The right, what are we about? We're about freedom. What does that mean? Freedom. It's I do think that empires of this importance and magnitude of the past had a kind of mission, and I think we've had that multiple times. Even George W. Bush's 2004 inaugural, or 2005 to be technical, inaugural address, where he's talking about we have a mission to bring democracy around the world. Whatever you want to say about that, it actually was something, and it added a certain idealism or motivation to this ginormous global empire, and I think there's something to be said for that. To be honest. All right, Lily, you want to jump in one more time?
Yeah, so I wanted to say, like, it seems like the question here is what is an American? And then we try and answer this through like a series of wars, etc., in order to form some sort of temporary identity where we can all sort of gather around a unified cause. But there's no like static sense of Americanness outside of like individual missions that Americans pursue.
Yeah, I agree. I think the American West is kind of an underrated source of American identity. And I don't think it's perfect. There's at least the way that we understand it, there's a lot of kind of rugged individualism of the American West. And I think that's imperfect, but nevertheless, I think there actually is a germ of an identity in the history of the West, and the West has been, the cauldron of every legend of this country, whether true or false. A itinerant criminal can turn into a hero, and a dance hall prostitute can become a legendary woman. There's just some kind of narrative creation or kind of storytelling facility of the American West that I think is maybe unsurpassed. So I think there's something there. But again, I do find it kind of hard to answer this question because it's like I do think that we do have a sense that we're on kind of the tail end of the American story. And it's in a way a little bit like too late to define this. And certainly the population has changed tremendously, which makes it even more difficult. So, but I do think it's a question that should be asked. Wilhelm.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I have two questions, which is like, well, first on the topic, like, it's surprising to hear, this kind of like shift towards this attitude of globalism, well, that we have like this history, this legacy of like patronage or maybe a responsibility to it, because there's there'd be great instability if we pull the extent to which we pull back from that. But isn't it
Yes.
that same kind of like patronage that's causing that instinct towards patronage that's causing this like almost like demographic turnover? The extent to which we take in refugees, the extent to which we take in like immigrants from like a variety of different vectors. I guess that's
No,
like kind of my first question. You don't think that that's part of
no,
the
there's
impetus?
no connection between invade the world and invite the world. There's no inherent connection. And at the end of the day, we take in, as a percentage of the population, we are still taking in, far fewer than Canada or other places like that. And yes, in a nation this large, it's a continent, effectively a continental, you know, nation state. And with this much wealth, it's probably a little bit too much to ask to say that it's going to be, you know, I don't know, lily white, like it's going to resemble Columbus, Ohio, or something. I mean, it's just not. There's going to be some, people who want to be part of the empire are going to come. I mean, that's there, but there's no real inherent connection with imperialism or colonialism and demographic change. I think they can be. I mean, America is itself maybe the best example of this, in that it was, founded to a large degree by religious dissenters, but also it was a outpost of the British Empire, and it went into a foreign territory where there was a foreign population, and it maintained itself. So I don't. You can also reverse it and say that there are many countries that never pursued empire who are rapidly pursuing demographic change at this moment. I mean, I just don't think there's a strong connection. I also, to go back to that, I do think the world would be worse without the American empire. There's just no question. And if you just, I mean, look, I have a certain affection for someone like Ron Paul, and I think the affection comes from the fact that I think he is absolutely genuine. He means what he says and he says what he means, and I respect that. But if we, pulled out troops from every military base, if we took the world off a kind of dollar standard, if there wasn't even like the threat of a response to something, I actually do think that the world would be a lot more chaotic. And I think we should also, I I say this, other people, conservatives, have been saying this for 30 years. Well, I think we should rethink the whole free trade dogma, and I think actually protecting industries and achieving a kind of continental autarky is actually a really good idea. It's something that I would absolutely support. That doesn't mean that I just don't think there should be any trade at all or something. I mean, that's just ridiculous. And all of those trade lines are guaranteed by gunships. And that the notion that we would have this kind of civilized order that includes something like this space itself, that you have people, I see them right here, people in Europe listening. I'm sure there's someone in China listening. I'm sure there's someone in Australia or Africa listening. That's just going to happen natural. There's some spontaneous economic order where that's going to happen, and that it isn't ultimately a product of empire. I think that is really foolish and just simply wrong.
Okay, I guess. Okay, so that's interesting. I'm surprised that you don't see any connection there between the instinct to patronage and our like global police, like world police kind of instinct. Just I don't know. It seems like a bargaining chip that we use.
That you can come here. I mean, the vast
Yeah.
majority of people who are subjected to the American empire are not coming here. I mean, 1 million
Sure.
people are coming a year.
Right. But
That
like
is
as an
really
example,
small.
Certainly, yeah. No, I'm not saying that it's like even like the primary proportion. I'm just saying that it is a subset. Like for example, like with like Rishi Sunak's like relationship with Narendra Modi, like established a relationship to allow like a high number of Indian immigrants into Britain, right? And that was like, if I'm not mistaken, like a function of like like a trade off for
That
some
was
strong trade deal, right?
post-Brexit.
Right.
Yeah, I
Sure.
mean that's post-Brexit. They foolishly cut off their access to continental Europeans, and they're now looking for other sources. I mean that's a complicated issue, but it definitely doesn't undermine what I was saying.
Sure. I'm just establishing that, like, the allowance of these immigrants is something that like has been used in a similar, like, in a way that's consistent with deals that the U.S. has made. But the other thing that's like that, kind of elephant in the room, and not to be too confrontational, but there were some sketchy tweets that like came out with like where Michael Hayden from the SPLC like was discussing you. Like, do you want to comment on that at all?
I don't have much of a comment. Yeah, I mean, they can discuss me. They can have whatever opinion they have on me. I don't know what to say. I saw someone do a photo of a screenshot, basically, of a tweet. I wasn't particularly exercised by it, but I don't know. You can come up with a conspiracy if you want. I doubt what I'm saying is going to please the SPLC, but whatever.
Certainly. Yeah. No, it's just, this is the perspective from the far right, just concerns about that. So
I know you guys are fucking Alex Jones, and everything's a like secret game. Yeah, that's your problem. Like sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, as in the words of Sigmund Freud.
Sure, but sometimes it's not. And it's best to be careful. But I'm sure you can see where that instinct or concern comes from. But
I
yeah,
understand
no, thank
it,
you.
but like sometimes it just strikes me as a bit schizo. Okay, Mark, how are you doing, my man?
Good. Yeah. So I was gonna, and I don't know if you already kind of because I was gonna more address the topic of the space, but I don't know if you guys have already kind of moved on.
Well, no, we can go back. I mean, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in my mind, I think that what is Alex Jones? It seems that ultimately he's a kind of mystic, right? He's a kind of priest and a kind of mystic, because he really is legitimately batshit, or at least the things that he says are crazy.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, he's doing it for kind of entertainment purposes. It's unclear, and he does kind of play that. In the DR, there was this line where people were playing with irony and humor, to be outrageous with irony and humor, and it might be a kind of similar phenomenon in his world, where he's playing this line of just like batshit conspiracy crazy and like the real world, right? He's playing that, like, that sort of liminal space between like legitimate crazy conspiracy and talking about like real geopolitical phenomenon, right? So, and I think that and I don't know, to me, I think he'll always remain a kind of enigma. I don't know if he's just crazy or if there's a kind of like intelligence there. We would, we're Nietzschean, so we wouldn't say it's necessarily evil, but we would say it's kind of diabolical, right? Or there's something, cynical about it.
See, I don't think if I were just to guess, and obviously you don't know what is in his heart and mind, I actually do think he believes it, although he's also highly incentivized to believe what he says. And whether he's conscious of acting the way, I think saying that he's a priest, I think, is very illuminating, and I think kind of
a priest of a mystic order, right?
Yeah,
so in other
because
words,
this is what he does is that. So if you go back to like QAnon and the transformation of the Trump movement post 2018, you could say What was kind of fascinating about QAnon, it wasn't just that it was fake news, like claiming that Hillary Clinton is about to be arrested or something. That's just simply wrong. Hillary Clinton is asleep in her bed right now. But it wasn't so much it was fake news, it was that this religious or mystical, you know, like morality play was playing out right before your eyes on your Facebook feed. So it wasn't just about getting the news, it was about like seeing this cosmic battle take place on Facebook, and so it heightened everything. It turned, oftentimes politics and the news of the day, it's fairly mundane. The Congress passed this omnibus bill, and they cut funding to this program. It's very boring. It doesn't actually affect your life. It's just whatever. But when you kind of like invest it with this mystery, it becomes like a life and death issue, and you can't see in their minds like a battle between good and evil taking place, where all this stuff is fascinating. And there's also, as you've often mentioned, there is a kind of like Gnostic quality to that, in the sense of, so this is what the USA Today says, but don't see, that's a lie. You have to look behind the headline or between the lines, and I can tell you what this really means. It's actually the opposite, or whatever. And so I think there was just something like, in a post-Christian society, and by post-Christian I don't mean without Christianity or anything like that, but it's kind of, they're moving away from like getting their mystery cult in a church, and they're kind of moving towards getting that through Trump or through a Facebook group. And I do think that's like a really remarkable phenomenon.
Yeah, and there are like these sort of syncretic aspects to, because I mean, ostensibly he's a Christian because he talks about being a Christian, but then he also talks about his father having been in. He said this on Joe Rogan's, and he seemed like he was being sincere, or he wanted us to believe that he was telling the truth, and not just fucking with us or telling a joke. Right? Again, it's something similar to this irony posting. It's this kind of mystic or conspiracy posting that he does, where he's walking this line, where he's kind of, because he's going between sort of lucid thinking, where he's talking about real geopolitical phenomena, and then he's going into this other world of like crazy conspiracy stuff, and that's really kind of why I think he's dynamic, is that he's sort of in both worlds, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things he was saying on Joe Rogan, on his Joe Rogan appearance, maybe he's been on multiple times, but was that his father, I think his father was part of a CIA or something like this, but or a government. He was part of some government, a top secret government department that was interfacing with aliens at Roswell, right? So that his father had been talking, had sat at meetings in boardrooms with the Greys, right? This is some crazy shit. Yeah, and so so he is kind of nutty, and I think that in an ideal world, we don't really know what's beyond, or we don't really know what's behind Musk's motivation to exclude Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And it could be like, the worst case scenario is that he's kind of like getting harassed by the ADL, or getting memos from the ADL, and he's just saying like, fine, I don't want the guy, he's too much headache.
Yeah.
Or he's making a kind of discerning, and we know that he is an independent thinker. Now, we don't know how closely he's looking at this particular matter, though ostensibly he's looking at it somewhat closely, because the whole reason, theoretically, that he took on Twitter was for free speech reasons.
Right.
But regardless, there's a lot that we don't know in terms of what he's thinking. But so, we don't know if he's making a discerning decision to exclude Alex Jones, which I would make the same decision, because, ideally Twitter should be, as much as possible, to the extent that it's a kind of political forum, it should be a forum for adults who are talking seriously and who
Yes.
are not, I mean, there is this idea of fake news. Again, there's a kind of like a blurry line there, and that's something that has to be looked at very carefully. But I mean, clearly, Alex Jones is guilty of fake news. I mean, he's one guy that you can say is clearly guilty of fake news.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to COVID and other issues, I think that you would have to look at it more carefully, and you would have to allow different views and this sort of thing. And I know that you have specific ideas about that, and there's
Well,
also
right,
a kind of
but no, but I think someone saying like this is harming the children, like they don't need these masks on, and they're having a terrible time in school, and you're like, I even if that's said in a kind of outlandish fashion, I think there's some you could take that as a good faith criticism, and so I don't want to just ban all these people, but I think it's very clear that Alex Jones was monetizing schizophrenia to like
and I think
there
it
is a
does.
line at some point, and particularly when you're making millions off something that is just overtly insane. I mean, I think you can then just really say this is toxic. Like there's just no, even if he is acting in good faith, he's still schizophrenic. I mean, you just can't defend this nonsense.
Yeah, no, and I think that part of his appeal to the dissident right, for example, I mean, I think that there is, to some extent, in the dissident right, a mental health issue, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, they're susceptible to some of his nonsense, some percentage of the dissident right. I mean, obviously, there are in the dissident right, there are people talking about real, an important geopolitical phenomena, and often coming down on sort of the correct side, in my view, of things. But there is also a kind of crazy element that he appeals to. I think that the other reason, because in hindsight, and honestly, I understand why people have a kind of like, he's a kind of guilty pleasure, and people have a kind of like sort of affection for the guy. I get it, and I get
that too. I think there's a slice of Americana, basically, of the the crazed conspiracy theorists from Texas. I mean, it's kind of perfect in a way.
Yeah, and I have no. And trust me when I say this, I have no like personal animosity to the guy. Like when I see the guy, I'm not like, I hate that fucking guy. I'm like, the guy's a nut, and it's unserious, and it's the guy has a mental health issue, and a lot of the right is giving the guy credibility, and they shouldn't be giving him credibility. They should be distancing themselves from him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and it's nothing personal against the guy. Again, I don't even have like a kind of natural dislike for the guy. I see ways in which he's charismatic. And I think the other thing too, in the DR generally, or the dissident right, that's what that acronym means. I think because he had managed to get a big platform. This is another part of it. So I think that some percentage of the dissident right is prone to a kind of crazy, non-lucid thinking, some percentage of it, and maybe every human being has that, ability to kind of slip into that. So it's not really but he represents that kind of bad element in my mind, he achieved he managed to develop a big platform. Is basically, I think, what his appeal was. So people on the dissident right, and maybe even still now, like people don't want to like burn that bridge, basically.
Yeah.
So they're kind of pandering to his social media or general media clout, right? That's part of it, and that's the kind of thing. It's just one of these things that, I mean, I don't. It's not particularly a feature necessarily of social media or of our society right now, but when people have power, even if they're not perfect and they're definitely worthy of criticism, often they escape criticism. And he has a certain amount of kind of clout or power in the media space generally. So I think people are like kind of don't want to like they don't want to upset his base too, because some percentage of the base, like they want to like not upset the kind of crazies that the guy panders to. and because they also want to appeal to those crazies, even if they understand them as crazies, even if they kind of cynically understand them as crazies, they want to appeal to them. So they don't want to alienate, Alex Jones' base. And it's kind of just like, it's grimy, it's dirty, and that kind of craziness should be excised, in my opinion. And in the ideal scenario is that Elon Musk is trying to form a forum, at least in the political aspect of this forum, for the adults.
Yeah, and even,
that's idealistic. Who
yeah,
knows?
I mean,
the guy could just
kick
us all
no,
off.
Definitely. As you know, I've been more critical of Elon Musk. I kind of got red pilled on his businesses, and I do think there's a lot of fraud there. But actually, I'm ambivalent about him. I agree that he's an independent person, and look at the reaction also of conservatives to this notion of like, you have freedom of speech but not freedom of reach, is what he said. So like, hate tweets and whatever won't get the same reach as someone's thoughtful tweet thread on the economy or something. Like, do you really want that not to be the case? Like, like, do you really want the heckler or some guy like yelling the N-word, or some guy just like calling some female journalist a what? You actually want that to be promoted, like I mean, again, I get like being suspicious about it or something like that, but if this thing, it's not just, you don't just have the right to do anything on this platform. And I would hope that, like, if an algorithm exists at all, it would kind of like, de-emphasize the stuff that's just pure nonsense, And look, I'm not innocent in this regard. I hope people don't read some stupid tweet that I sent at 2 a.m. being like, fuck off or whatever. I hope that's not actually promoted. I hope, something that I say that's more thoughtful is promoted. So granted, we're kind of giving Elon the benefit of the doubt here, but I just find it kind of amazing when the conservatives' first reaction to like, we're going to de-emphasize harassment is like, that's terrible. It just shows this kind of mindset that they're in, which gets back to what I was talking about earlier, that kind of emergency mindset where you just have to scream no and yell at people, endlessly. Everything is like a big school board meeting where you go in and yell at Dr. Fauci for being a Nazi or whatever. This is kind of where they are right now mentally. And I think that is why they won't be able to achieve anything and shouldn't be able to achieve anything.
Yeah, and I'll let other people speak because I don't want to dominate the mic, but I'll just make the final remark. I mean, I think that is true, that there is kind of, I think that the dissident right sees some kind of what we would say, speech that's kind of a low tone, that's vulgar, maybe racial epithets and this sort of thing, or just really kind of cheap propaganda that's not intellectual, but it's more just kind of, calling out the Jews, for example.
Yeah.
I think that people see that, in the dissident right, they see that like as kind of necessary, as a kind of necessary aspect of populism. Now, I think that the dissident right from here on out, I don't think that they're ever going to have the reach that they desire, because they'll basically be kept in check, and not just by the ADL and not just by Jews or whatever, right? But by Elon Musk, by cooler heads, right? And I think that and I've called it before kind of micro populism, the white nationalism on Telegram, for example, because they don't really have access to the population. They're populists without the population. So, so they're able to have meetings of some size, and they're able to, grow in a kind of limited fashion, but they're not actually speaking to America. People don't know who the hell they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And unlike Trump is a kind of legitimate. Trump is the populist of our time. I mean, he is he was the populist candidate. He may have like since lost that favor, but he was the one who had the soapbox and who had the kind of position to be a populist effectively.
Yeah.
But so I think that this stuff it just kind of lowers, you know what I mean? Like just having the kind of cheap, like vulgar, non-intellectual, non-thoughtful propaganda that kind of characterized, Twitter, for example, during 2016, the memes and stuff like that. I think it kind of just coarsens and lowers the whole discussion, honestly. And the other thing too is I don't think that populism is. I mean, I think you said it. I think the populist moment is over, in the sense that, and I think also probably you agree with this too, is that ultimately, power is decided top down, from the top down. So really, the more important goal would be changing the minds of people that can actually affect change, people that are in power or who can achieve power,
Right.
who can make money, and who are intelligent and who are civilized, and not, people who want to kind of basically present a kind of terrifying and horrifying picture to people going forward. We're like, wait, these guys want to rule us. These guys seem like not good people, basically. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think that I think that there has to at least develop another road to power. Now, I honestly, and maybe you can't tell from what I'm saying here, is that I actually have no animosity towards those people, even though I think that the approach is not the best, and I think that they'll struggle with that approach. I think that it's fine that they pursue it, and I'm not intending to convince them of my approach. I think that they should pursue their own approach, and it's kind of like two evolutionary branches going in separate directions. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
which is the way that evolution works. There has to be a kind of like diversity for the best thing to succeed. That's a kind of premise of evolution. So I wouldn't dissuade them from pursuing their path, but I think that path may already be closed, because I think that what we're seeing is that we're seeing the media world, which became democratized through social media, it's starting to settle, right? And the players are starting to get into place, and we're starting to see what it actually looks like, right? There's going to be you can say some things, but you're not going to be able to say all things. And really, it's about kind of like being very intelligent. If you have a political agenda, or you have a kind of vision for the world, you have to present it intelligently and coherently, and make sound arguments, and convince intelligent people in high places of the soundness of your vision. Everyone else will lose, is basically what it boils down to.
Yes. I definitely agree.
That's all I had to say.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let me go a little bit quicker through our guest. I'm not sure I want a 3-hour bender today. I was thinking about just kind of talking this through, because I woke up and I was thinking about this. Okay, let me just go down the line here. This is not necessarily in the order in which you came on, but not Dr. Davinsky.
Hello, Spencer.
Hi.
I just want to say that I'm a long-time fan. I'm a sociologist. So I just wanted to touch on one thing, because the thing I appreciate about you is you don't tend to grift. Like, you don't take talking points that are popular on the right. For instance, you're pro-abortion, right? You're pro-vaccine. You're pro the intervention in Ukraine. So that's what I appreciate about you. And I think you mentioned the other day that you'd have a lot more followers if you kind of stayed in a lane and picked a side. But I have no respect for people like that, like Steven Crowder types, or you know
Right.
what I'm saying. So the what I wanted to address today, and forgive me, I'm a little bit drunk. It's Saturday night here. I'm in Thailand. So
Okay.
what I wanted to address was race and IQ. So I've done a lot of research into this. I actually got the last interview ever with Professor Flynn, the founder of the Flynn Effect.
Right.
And I've posted my sources underneath this chat. So, so basically, you can check out the sources here. But there was a 2015 meta-analysis that was done by the University of Amsterdam, and they found that the average sub-Saharan IQ is 80, and they're talking about in sub-Saharan African countries today, so Kenya and all of these countries, it's 80, which seems low, but from old standards, that was the average for Britain and Western Europe in the 1950s. So I think the Flynn effect is taking place there. So
The
I
average
mean,
IQ was 80 in Britain in the 1950s.
yeah. You can look at the meta-analysis. I've got it in the video. It's about halfway through. So yeah, they're saying that it was comparable to Western Europe during that time. So my hypothesis is, as nutrition improves, as education improves in these countries, then there'll be a rise. Because you can't really
Okay.
say that
Well,
1950.
this is all fair. Let me do this. I promise you that I will listen to that video that you posted. So is this just you? This is you speaking in this video?
Yeah, this is me speaking. So the first skip to like 3 minutes in, because the
Okay.
first one I added, and it was kind of just me speaking, but I put all my sources about 3 minutes in, and it only goes for about 7 minutes. And I really think that it could possibly change your mind definitively on this subject, because I do think it's a bad meme. For instance, Lynn. Lynn is the one, when you go to like highest and lowest average IQs in the world, and you get that list, that's compiled by Lynn. And
Yeah.
Lynn was he's like 90 years old now. And what he
Yeah.
did is he would go to the developing world and he would purposely exclude educated populations out of the average. So he wouldn't test those, which would bring down the average. And this is documented as well.
Well, he says that explicitly in his books, actually, that he's discounting. I mean, it would be strange to go to Oxford University and get an average IQ of a bunch of graduate students and then declare that the average IQ of Britain is 130 or something. That would be
but
not.
I'm saying it's not a fair sample, because he did take the educated people in European countries. He didn't exclude those. That's what they were saying in this study. So I do think it's interesting, because there's one, it's like 62, which would be complete mental retardation. It's like,
Right.
It's untenable. And one last thing is, people talk about the G loading. Are you familiar with this?
Yes, the G factor, yes.
So they say G is the inherent intelligence aspect that can't be improved. And there's another study that I mentioned in this video.
They don't
from
necessarily say that. General intelligence is not an inherent thing that can't be improved. General intelligence has been improved by the Flynn effect. General intelligence is a kind of all-encompassing ability for one to do anything. So, someone who's quite smart is going to actually be pretty good at math, pretty good at writing a poem, pretty good at writing a essay. He might even be pretty good at baseball, to be honest, because these things are, generally speaking, correlated, though they're not correlated at the extreme. In the sense that someone who might be a brilliant, Dostoevsky couldn't tie his shoes or something like that. He's so brilliant, outsized in linguistic capacity, but totally, incompetent in other ways. But generally speaking, all of these things are aligned. That's what G is. It's not the idea that G can't change through something like the Flynn effect or just education.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I have heard some kind of alt-right figures mention G. But what I was going to say is the Ravens test is the highest G loading for an IQ test. And they did this in South Africa with university students. And they showed that the G increased the most actually for Black students. So I do think that it is a cultural thing also. So if you go to populations that have never seen printed materials, geometric shapes, they're sitting under a tree, they're not in a proper classroom setting, you can't really take that with much value. You know what I mean?
Okay. I'll say this. I'm going to move on, but I definitely will listen to your video. I promise you that.
Would it be possible to get, I've been asking for a while, I've interviewed some big names like J.F. Garapi, Professor Flynn, John McAfee. I'd love to interview you if that'd be possible.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I think
So,
I'm following you now. So just send me a DM.
okay, I will message you. Dude, I really love your content. You're one of my favorite people to listen to, actually.
Oh, well,
And
thank you.
I really
appreciate that.
appreciate how you've leveled out. You've always been kind of level though, and that's the thing. Is like they took these clips where you spurged out for a little bit. But even back in 2016, when I'd listen to you, you'd always reason and follow a logical train of thought. So I mean, I feel bad for you in a way because those
Well,
clips were not
well, yeah. I
representative
mean, they
of who
want to
you are.
demonize you and things. I think they find me less useful now. They're kind of going back to the old standards and things like that.
Yeah.
But you know, it is what it is. You can only live your life. But yeah, thanks for send me a DM and I will listen to your video today. And yeah,
No
all right.
worries. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Richard.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to ask someone who hasn't spoken yet. So Matthew McGorry.
Hello, I am an Alex Jones supporter and probably a nut by your standards. So if I just lay
Okay.
out my viewpoint, you can just analyze me, tear me to shreds, or whatever you want to do.
Okay,
So,
good. Glad you came
way,
on.
so way back, I'm 40 plus. Way back, the time of the Iraq War, I was really upset about, a war, and I didn't want this. I wanted peace.
Yeah.
And anyway, the media, a lot of the media sources were all pretty much pro-war. It was Tony Blair, and it was just war, 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 like both political parties.
Yes.
There was like one guy, Robin Cook, in the government, but he didn't represent a party, so there was nobody he could vote for. So anyway, the Iraq War happens. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous to publicly speak now.
Well, don't worry
the-
about it. You're doing fine.
Oh, thanks. The Iraq War turns into a bloodbath, and it's not just a decapitation of Saddam Hussein and his government, it's a complete annihilation of the country. And that really upset me deeply, and a
Mhm.
lot of people. And then I started to think, well, does this government really represent who I am? Like there's no peace part. I can't say, I don't want this war. Where's my vote going? And so then I started to look, it was earlier days of the internet, and I found Alex Jones through some different things. And maybe he is a mystic and maybe he's a bullshitter, but there were aspects of his insight that really piqued my interest. And
Okay.
I just
What are some examples of those things?
Well, he goes into the sense of a conspiracy, and it tied in quite well because I was looking for a newspaper or a political group in the UK I could affiliate with and say this is my party. There was none, when there was obviously a certain amount of popularism for that kind of view, and that's when I started to think there's no TV shows that are ever anti-war. I started to wonder, is there a conspiracy to just is my country just a war machine?
Right.
A little, and so that's what got me down the path of thinking this doesn't really represent me. So I wrote a few notes here. So why is no political discourse in the media? And that's really it. Because I just get the feeling that we're in a very controlled paradigm. And I've gone back to Christianity. I'm
Well,
not trying to convert anybody.
you're
But
right.
go ahead.
I mean, we are in a controlled paradigm. I think it's actually much less controlled than it was 20 years ago, and certainly 50 years ago. I think I was talking about this a little bit on the last space I did. I mean, at least using America as an example, and I think it's similar in the UK and around the world. I mean, we had 3 major television networks, and then PBS, which is I guess the equivalent of the BBC, not quite as good, but yes, there was an ability to form public opinion that's unsurpassed, and I actually think where we are now, and Alex Jones's popularity and salience is testament to this. Where we are now is someplace much more chaotic. In many ways, we have witnessed in our own lifetimes, 'cause I'm about your age, is the decline of this major media infrastructure in a technological society where they can manufacture consent and an opinion. I think things are much more chaotic, and people are kind of dealing with the problem of social media, and it's a problem that they don't quite have the tools to fix. And
Yeah.
I think there are also
Yeah.
some real big issues with the fact that we don't have a dominant structure above us anymore. The dominant structures above us are platforms, which is very different than a television station. And I mean, another thing we talked a little bit about, but like there's no one music group that kind of like speaks to a generation or at least a particular time. There's no kind of one thing. Now culture is just so fragmented that, you know, people don't know what someone else is listening to and they have kind of nothing in common. We still have, you know, for better and for worse, mostly for worse, we have Marvel movies are kind of like a uniculture, so to speak. But you know, and I think NFL football as well serves that function. But and you know, your version of football over in the UK and so on. But overall, I think we've within our own lifetimes we've witnessed this kind of decline of a unified society and a kind of descent into something that actually is much more chaotic. And I don't know exactly how this is going to play out.
I hope that you're right. If I may just, I'll let other people speak, but I hope that you're right. But as a guy who's generally anti-war, I was
Uh-huh.
big into Facebook from the early days, and I think around the time of the war in Syria with Assad and all that kind of stuff, I think it was kicking off maybe 2012,
Yeah.
and in those days, I think Facebook was true free speech. But since those days, loads of groups have been shut down, and
Oh
these are
yeah.
not radicalized groups, and that's what I'm talking. Freedom of speech obviously is a potentially dangerous thing, and people could fragment into different groups and potentially oppose each other. So I can understand from a more zoomed out perspective that the managing a population that has lots of different views from a governmental aspect. It'd be nice if everybody was just, like a row of corn. They're all just the same, like the same opinions, just easier to manage. Maybe I'm cynical, but I think since the Iraq War thing and my sense of always the conspiracy, and maybe it was fanned by the flames of Alex Jones and other people and in what you would call the right, that it has encouraged my thinking to become very independent. And
Yeah.
what's funny about the right is a lot of the time I'll meet someone, I'll agree with him because my wife's anti-vax and I didn't take the vaccine and all this kind of stuff. And what's funny is that when I meet people who are more to the left, they tend to be more in agreement with each other. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be cynical of the lack of analytical thinking, but in the UK, of those people that I meet who are lefties, they pretty much think whatever the TV tells them to. I mean, that's
Well,
yeah,
yes, but maybe they are also smart enough to kind of know which way the wind is blowing. In the sense that they want a career at whatever corporation or law firm or media company they work at, and they kind of can, their antennae are more attuned to these things, and they can kind of pick up on slight changes in the wind, and
yeah.
that's actually a sign of intelligence. Um, this is good. You look, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm bashing Alex Jones and you don't like that, but you seem like a very genuine person and a good faith actor. So I really don't have any animosity towards you. You know, let me say one thing before I move on to some other people. There's this kind of, because this goes along with this notion of like the fragmenting of a unified national culture where we more or less watch the same television, we have the same movies in common, the same sports, we listen to the same music. So there is a kind of, you know, every nation's fragmented a bit, of course, but there is a kind of unified structure to it, and we're moving away from that. I've seen this meme in the dissident right about how they worry about like the elites. They worry about the American middle class, and they're bringing in a kind of Hispanic underclass that's more manageable, or something like this. And you hear this. This is a kind of meme in the dissident right, and you also hear this with Tucker Carlson, who's picked up on this probably from the dissident right. They want a more compliant society. Tucker Carlson has said this explicitly. I think that is completely ridiculous and wrong. There is nothing more compliant than the suburban white middle class of the mid 20th century. Like when Walter Cronkite spoke, they listened and they were willing to sacrifice, go to war, show up on time, vote, get behind political leaders, even political leaders of a party they didn't like. That is compliance. And this notion that like you bring in an impoverished underclass and that is more easy to rule, I think that is just a obviously incorrect assumption. I think the elite are going to have a very difficult job managing this American population that we're transitioning into. And I think they might very well miss the white bread suburban American middle class of yesteryear. But anyway, okay, I will ask you this. Can we go just a little bit faster? Because I don't want to go on a 3-hour bender. I kind of want to wrap this up. So let's try to be concise here, folks. And I will head everyone who has their hand up. So Arizia, the Persian cat, you have
Hi, it's Arcia.
Hey. Okay.
Hi, Mr.
Arcia.
It's good to speak to you again. I remember our last conversation was about Marilyn Manson putting beer bottles in his butt and throwing it into the crowd.
Oh my God. Yes, I witnessed that act. Yes.
No, but speaking of Alex Jones, it would be quite entertaining to see you have a conversation with him.
Well, I did at one point. I was actually on his show, I think
What?
in late 2019.
Ah.
And I imagine the clip is out there somewhere, although maybe it has kind of disappeared. Sometimes things do disappear on the internet. Yeah, I would like
When I
that
look
too.
your name up on YouTube, it's just clips from 2016.
Real quick, it's on Odyssey.
It is.
If
Oh,
you
okay.
want to see it.
Yeah, I really want to see it.
Good. But yeah, I mean, look, I Mark was saying this as well. I have a certain affection for Alex Jones. It's not what he says, but it's who he is. Like there is something just hilarious about him. He's just this American type, and I'm not even sure that there are types like this in other countries. I think there's just something so uniquely American about the, loud, gruff, overweight, gravel voice Texan talking about, the elites destroying the
that
Constitution.
stereotype.
There's just something just American as apple pie about him.
No, yeah, I definitely see that. So wait, well, one thing I've been wondering though is I can't really tell if you're against traditionalism in of itself and do lean more socially liberal, or if you just hold resentment for modern conservatives from obvious reasons. Like
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm not a traditionalist in the sense that I think everything old is good.
Right.
To quote Mark Brahman explicitly, I think there is much that is old that has been quite poisonous for a very long time. So I just don't have this knee-jerk reaction to innovation. I think that we should get it right, and I think also times change. And sometimes the toolkit that you have is really feckless in addressing new problems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But on another way, I am fairly traditional, and so on. But yes, the contemporary right has always just rubbed me the wrong way, and so
I feel like maybe you and Jones had more in common back in like the early 2000s when you were both from what you described in this clique of where you were against the war in Iraq, things like that.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
He was a lot more mentally sane, but yeah,
he was a bit more. I think he kind of played into the Alex Jones myth. Although, there was something almost self-conscious about like ripping his shirt off on air and things like that. Like it's he played into the act.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm going to move on just to kind of get through some people here.
For sure. Peace
okay.
out.
Yeah, peace out. Okay, JJ.
Hey, Richard. I got a pretty off-topic question, but I just want to know, what's your opinion of psychedelic drugs?
Not a fan.
Okay, that's all.
I don't know if I need to go more into that. I don't know. I don't know which I dislike more, psychedelics or marijuana. I might dislike marijuana more.
Reasonable.
Yes. Although I have a certain thing for stimulants. Anything that makes life more exciting and increases your energy and lust, I think that's good. Things that take you into another world, it's basically a kind of chemical version of mystery religion. And anything that just turns you into an idiot, I kind of inherently hate, i.e. marijuana. Okay. Well, I will. All right, real quick. We have some people with their hands up. So, Sola Requiem.
Hey, Richard. I just
Hey.
want to say, really loved your debate on Politically Provoked. I don't know if you remember doing that one, the abortion one. It was pretty entertaining. It got a good laugh out of me, but yeah. Yeah, I guess less of a question, more of a statement. I want to know your opinion on. Do you think conservatives love Alex Jones has to do with like the big culture shock of the 2015, 2016 with people like you, Sargon, Alex Jones, and like a few other like dissident right people kind of, and it's kind of like almost what's the word? Leftovers, I guess, or remaining figure of like your impact that you left, and a few other people that a lot of like right wingers like, yeah, we still like Alex Jones for that like culture shock, like anti-establishment stuff. Just
Well,
want to know
they
your opinion
never
on that.
really liked me, though. Remember, whenever Ann Coulter has mentioned me, it's always been something almost indistinguishable from Antifa. And she's known about me for a very long time, and I could actually tell you how that is. And she's never been helpful. Fox News would ignore me. I remember, what is her name? Who's the other one? Laura Ingraham. She pretended she didn't know who I was even after like a month before she had done a report or something. So I think they viewed me as something very dangerous because I never really was pointing in their direction. I mean, a lot
Kind
of
of
this
like
is
Milo
self-serving.
Yiannopoulos and what's it, Nick Fuentes now, are they kind of like try
They'll
to ignore
defend them much, much, much sooner than they'll ever defend me. Because those people, at the end of the day, they are going to be on Team Red. To take the Nick Fuentes thing, in 2019, he was supporting Yang and was bashing Trump. Well, 2019 ended and 2020 rolled around and he was furiously, desperately on Team Trump. And he will be again. So they know that type of person points in their direction. I know this is self-serving and, arrogant and conceited or whatever. I do think they know that I am not going to always be on their side. Like, I'm doing something different. I have different views. I have nuance, you could say. I'm going after something else. I'm not a team player. And they want a team player. Alex Jones wasn't always a team player. I'm sure in the Bush era, he was, bashing, Bush tremendously. But once he got on board with Trump and the GOP in general got on board with Trump, he was aiming in their direction. So it kind of is like the berserker stormtrooper, so you have your professional soldiers and we're like, well, gosh, should we send them in there? They might get killed. And then you have this like maniac with a butcher knife. You're like, all right, just send him in there.
If you're okay, can I ask one quick question too?
Sure.
What is your opinion on like spotting someone who's like an online grifter or someone whose like views generally are like nuanced and they changed? Like, I'm sure your views today aren't the same as they were in like 2015, 2016. like on par 100%. Like, do you have any advice for like an audience to be
Yeah,
like, yeah,
because
this
look,
person's grifting?
yes, because look, you could say that I'm a grifter in the sense that I ask for money. You could say that. But I think it's so I mean, I think you pick them out in the sense of I don't know, I can spot someone pandering to me. If someone is challenging me or trying to teach me something, or who has a serious disagreement that actually like brings the conversation forward, that person is not a grifter, whether he's asking for money or not. The ability to change one's mind, I think that's also very, very important. You don't want to be changing your mind every hour, of course, but you know what I mean. You evolve, you get older, you rethink things. Um, but yeah, I mean, like the just so many people. I mean, I guess I'm not going to name names, but there are too many to name. I mean, they're effectively cheerleaders. They're a cheerleading squad for the GOP, and it's like pay me, pick me. I'm gonna do some funny photo holding a gun, or something like that, and I'm cute. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, but there is some gray area and there's kind of nuances. From what I can tell from say Milo, um, he seems to be kind of going off in an interesting direction. I mean, by interesting, I mean toxic. He's almost like becoming a Roger Stone like figure much more than the star which he wanted to be. I mean, I can remember in 2018 when he might have even been 2017 where he went on stage in full drag and was almost like rebranding away from conservatism and trying to like influence the gay community or something. Who knows what he was doing, but I don't think he wants. And we've seen the clip of him on Catholic Shopping Channel. I don't think he's trying to do that now. I think he does have a kind of gift of insinuating himself into places. He has a gift of kind of like recognizing something that's hot, and he's going to kind of push it. So he was interning for Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's this interesting photo of him with Kanye West. I mean, it's just the guy is bad news, to put it mildly.
I appreciate it,
Okay,
Richard. Thank you for
sure.
that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'll power through these. So let's do two more, and then that's it. So Daisy and Meander. I'll go to Meander first. Meander.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted to make just a brief comment here. I think maybe what a lot of people forget is back in the day, Alex Jones wasn't just known as some guy on the right. He had a lot of fans on the left. I'm sure you
Yeah.
remember like the days of like the Young Turks and so on. Like he would like have pretty good conversations with them, and a lot of people on the left thought he was crazy, but like they really admired him for at least opposing like the Bush wars and so on. But now he's just this like, you know, awful figure that like people really hate, and he's just seen as just a mouthpiece for Donald Trump, and that's about it.
Yes. That is very true. There was a kind of left wing quality to Ron Paul in 2008. I think a lot of people who were donating money to the Ron Paul campaign and came out of politics were kind of, or excuse me, came out of apathy into politics, were previously apathetic and then were super fans wearing Ron Paul t-shirts and going to these rallies. I think I think there was probably a lot of left wing people and hippies
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff who were getting excited by him.
Yeah, definitely. I think even Ron Paul, once again, he had a lot of support on the left as well. He would go on like these big talk shows, and people would, clap anytime he said something anti-war. Same
Yeah.
with Alex Jones, and now he's just known as this guy who denies school shootings and, encourages his followers to go basically terrorize the families of
Yeah,
kids who were
it's
killed in these
full
shootings.
right wing nuttery. Even Ron Paul. I mean, I don't pay attention to Ron Paul that intensely, but it seems like any time I see a tweet from the Ron Paul Institute, it's kind of like effectively pro-Trump. It's at least aiming at the liberals. It's kind of like Glenn Greenwald or something. where like you're a critical free thinker, but you just so happen to criticize Democrats 100% of the time.
Yeah,
You know?
basically, it's I think, yeah, they kind of have to, right? That whole libertarian thing is basically dead.
Yes.
A lot of them are just supporting Donald Trump, and those who aren't are basically having to fend for him anyway in one way or another.
Yes. And they see where the audience is. All right. I appreciate that. And okay, Daisy, real quick, you get the last word. Go for it.
Thank you. So just really quick, I did want to say something about the Alex Jones thing. That's mainly what I wanted to say. But I did want to touch on one thing somebody mentioned about how basically the mainstream media and everybody talks about wanting a compliant society.
Yeah.
I think that's obviously the like best case scenario, but whoever, whatever, I'm not going to make any, wild Alex Jones-esque reaches as to who is exactly pushing a theory of maybe replacement that is great. But the replacement that's being made, you could make the argument there's a lot of cognitive dissonance as to the fact that they're replacing a certain part of the population with another type, aka more urban style. I don't really know if that's actually what they want, if they want more compliance, or if they're just too stupid to understand that the type of people that they're replacing, the middle class, that the beaver type families, they're not replacing it with the type of people that are compliant. So I can't tell if they want to shoot themselves in the foot or if there's just some greater some other reason why they're doing it. I can't really put my finger on that. But the Alex Jones thing, I did want to say, I had a question. Yeah. I had a question, and that was, do you not think that, so the guy mentioned that Alex Jones used to be a little less kooky, looking at he did a lot of reporting, particularly in Austin. Like, I'm from Texas. I used to follow him. I'm a lot younger, but I've been involved quite most of my life. So I was following Alex Jones whenever he was doing more local stuff. And do you not kind of maybe think that the reason that he's gotten kooky, I guess you could say, would be because like stuff has really just spiraled? Like, like the right likes to say, well, if we're going to be black pilled, it's too late. It's clown pilled now. Like, the world's just so crazy. Maybe Alex Jones is kind of what we need to like throw it in the face of people to show them what's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and I think that is part of the motivation, but I would say that Alex Jones's popularity and salience among the right is because he's pointing in their direction. And it's the same with Glenn Greenwald. When he's just endlessly criticizing the liberal elites, it gets to this point where it's like, all right, this guy's on our team. And I do think that there was something to Alex Jones when, and I'm not even sure he's gotten less crazy. I mean, his big move into notoriety was like infiltrating Bohemian Grove and stuff like that. So I think he's always been pretty nuts. He might be more kind of like overtly, flamboyantly nuts now. But he's always been nuts. But, I think in previous times, he wasn't really on Team Red. It's the Trump era that due to Trump's like electoral strategy, or maybe even just his base instincts, he turned conservatism into this, almost like the margins became the mainstream. And I was a part of that. And so now he is the mainstream. I mean, it's like denying the election is mainstream. Liking Alex Jones is mainstream. So I think it's more about that kind of transformation. But his popularity among the right, I think, is solely down to, well, not solely. I think I kind of got into the psychological aspects of it in my little blog post. But I think it's mainly about the fact that he's pointing in their direction. He's like the stormtrooper of the conservative attack on established institutions.
I agree to an extent, and I'm not sure how much we're allowed to push it as far as like language goes on. Not foul language, but as far as calling out like people that are responsible for these types of things. So I'm trying to like weasel my way around, naming certain groups. But
Sure.
do you not think that maybe like the reason that that's become more mainstream is because people really are just saying like, hey, there actually are these group of people, there is this group of people that are controlling certain institutions and that are pushing us in, like in ways that are degenerative as a society. And maybe I wouldn't even say that he's mainstream particular. I mean, he has a lot of notoriety and people know who he is and he's very popular, but it's still like for me to sit down at the dinner table with my Republican family, I could never say like, hey, by the way, like the Jews own all the banks and stuff and maybe we should look into that. Like that's not something that's particularly acceptable yet.
Right. But I would just, you've said what you've said. I would just stress that so much of elite control, like it is actually through soft power, and it is through kind of delicately managing things that could get out of hand and kind of bringing them back in line. And I would kind of nudge you away from thinking that like it's this mustache twirling, protocols of Zion type situation where you have people in the back room.
I'm not quite that far.
Not quite. People like cackling about, oh, we're going to, turn the entire population to be transgendered, by 2030 or something.
No. I definitely don't believe there's just some. I don't believe in the 2030 agenda by any means, but I do think that it's like it's a slow process of basically like the analogy of like the frog in the boiling pot. Like they're just slowly turning the temperature up on us.
But whether they're actively doing this, I mean, what I'm suggesting is that elites are managing a situation, and I think this is a situation that is getting out of hand. I mean, in some ways, what we're noticing is just the general decline of our civilization altogether. And it's not some kind of secret plan on some level.
I agree completely.
I mean, maybe there are some people, there is some motivations. I don't want to, you have to be nuanced about this. I think there are motivations, but I actually think one of the primary motivations is to kind of manage this thing. But there's so many kind of like fundamental causes that are leading to our just general decline as a civilization that you're not going to ultimately find like a lizard shapeshifter in a back room that's like pressing a button doing this, actively doing it to you.
That's definitely batshit insane. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's make that the last word. And thank you, everyone, for contributing. I'm sorry there are a few of you who did not get on, but that is simply a matter of time. And this is a good discussion. Hope everyone enjoyed it. And I will talk to you guys soon. Go check out Substack. If you want to join the group, you can. And I will talk to you all soon. All right. Ciao.
Peace out.